Kill Adolf Hitler. That was a clear mission on July 20th, 1944. A bomb was placed right next to the German dictator. But the plot, called Operation Valkyrie, failed, and Hitler survived, which seems incredible when you see the pictures of the aftermath. Despite this, the plot remains a symbol of German resistance against the Nazi regime, and one of the most famous attempts at ending Hitler's life. Maybe you've already heard of Operation Valkyrie. It has been the subject of several books and films, such as 2008's Valkyrie, which starred Tom Cruise as Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg. He planted a bomb at Hitler's heavily guarded headquarters, known as the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia, present-day Poland. Who was Claus von Stauffenberg? Who was the man who wanted to kill Adolf Hitler? At the German Resistance Memorial Center, you can find out. Stauffenberg was a career army officer from an aristocratic Catholic family. In 1939, he participated in the Nazi invasion of Poland and later the occupation of France. Stauffenberg was severely wounded in an air raid in northern Africa, losing his left eye, right hand, and 2 fingers on his left hand. He was flown back to Germany and assigned to the General Army Office in Berlin after his recovery. Stauffenberg was a conservative and a nationalist who initially supported Nazi policies, but his opposition to the regime grew as the war went on.
He became an opponent of the National Socialist regime in 1941 to 42. On the one hand, he realized that Germany could no longer win this war. On the other hand, the National Socialist crimes of violence behind the front and the murder of hundreds of thousands of Europe's Jews could not be justified by anything.
Stauffenberg joined a resistance group made up of high-ranking German military officers and civilians who wanted to kill Hitler, end the war, and reintroduce the rule of law. What was Operation Valkyrie? It was originally a German military contingency plan in case of civil unrest, which was more of a possibility as Germany was losing the war. The conspirators turned it into a plan for a coup d'etat to set up a provisional government and negotiate peace with the Allies. Stauffenberg was the only conspirator to still have personal access to Hitler. What happened on July 20th, 1944? Stauffenberg attended a meeting with Hitler at the Wolf's Lair. He placed a briefcase with an explosive device next to Hitler and left. Just before 1 p.m., the bomb exploded. 4 people died, but Hitler survived with only minor injuries. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg was already on his way to Berlin, believing that Hitler was dead. The conspirators then attempted to seize power, but once it became known that Hitler had survived, the coup attempt was crushed. Hitler visited a hospital to meet those who were injured. It was used as a propaganda tool to show that he was unharmed and in control. Why did the July plot fail? The assassination attempt failed for several reasons. Stauffenberg didn't have enough time to set up a second explosive in his briefcase, causing only half the intended effect. The meeting was moved to a wooden building instead of the usual bunker with concrete walls. A heavy oak table shielded Hitler at the moment of the explosion. Stauffenberg initially placed the briefcase next to Hitler, but someone moved it away before it detonated. The aftermath of a failed coup. Stauffenberg and 3 co-conspirators were shot that same night, just after midnight, in the courtyard of the Bendler Block in Berlin. He was 36 years old and left behind his wife and their 5 children. A large-scale wave of arrests began, as the network of conspirators was larger than initially assumed. The first trials took place in August 1944 and resulted in about 100 death sentences. Today, we know that some 300 men and women were part of the inner and wider circle of the July 20th plot. The Bendler Block now houses the German Resistance Memorial Center to commemorate those who stood against the Nazi regime. Plötzensee Prison in Berlin is another significant memorial site. It's where 89 men from the July 20th plot were executed. including Fritz Detlev Graf von der Schulenburg.
This is my grandfather and grandmother with 4 of their 6 children. This one in the middle is my mother.
Schulenburg's grandson shares the story of his family's legacy and the high price he paid for his conviction that the Nazi regime must end.
My grandfather is counted among the closest circle of this attempted coup and assassination. He was then sentenced to death on August 10th in a show trial. Like many others who were involved in the attempted coup, he is said to have said that he hoped that someone else would carry out this assassination attempt at a more opportune moment, and that he had taken part in this resistance in order to save Germany from nameless injustice. He was then taken to Plötzensee, wrote a farewell letter to my grandmother, and was executed on the same day in Plötzensee.
In Schulenburg's farewell letter to his wife, he said, "What we did was inadequate, but in the end, history will judge and acquit us. Do not mourn for me, but live as if I were looking over your shoulder and living and laughing with you." What if they had really killed Hitler? If the operation had succeeded, it doesn't mean the Nazi era would have ended. Hetman Göring would have likely become Hitler's successor, or a provisional government been set up. Loyal Nazi and SS factions might have resisted, leading to internal conflict and possibly a civil war in Germany. But Hitler's death could have led to earlier peace negotiations with the Allied forces and an earlier end to the war.
Just think about the number of people who died after July 20th, 1944 as bombing victims, but also the 250,000 prisoners in German concentration camps who died in the first quarter of 1945. In some way or another, these are all deaths that could have been avoided, but that is really speculation and, in a way, also a hope.
Long after the war ended, the conspirators were regarded as traitors. Over time, this negative image changed. Now, the July 20th plot is seen as a symbol of resistance against Hitler's dictatorship and National Socialism. Public buildings in Germany display the national flag on July 20th, and Bundeswehr recruits pledge their loyalty to Germany's constitution, which ensures fundamental rights and provides a framework for the rule of law. Commemorative events are held both in the Bendler Block and at the Plötzensee Memorial.